Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. What's going on in the world right now is the coronavirus is hit the world. It's a global pandemic. Started in China, spread throughout Asia, going to Iran and places like that. It eventually made its way to Europe, where it's completely shut down countries like Italy, and it started to make its way through the United States. To counter this, some states have decided to shut down their schools for the next 2 to 3 weeks at least, which means that your students, or you, the student, are going to be home for the next 2 to 3 weeks without the structure of the typical classroom and not the guidance of your teacher in a face-to-face situation. You'll still get guidance, you'll still have some structure, but a lot of that's being done online, and it's going to be a different type of learning. So what I have decided to do is create a Todd Talk in honor of the COVID-19, which is what this strand of the coronavirus is known as. I'm going to provide 19 different things that you could be doing during this 2 to 3 weeks, just to express your love of learning. And this is a real opportunity. I mean, they talk about what are called teachable moments, and these are moments when something presents itself, and it may be a hardship, or it might be, something that is a challenge, and then you using that to learn as a result. And so this is definitely a teachable moment. We're going to have 2 to 3 weeks of unstructured time where you could really learn something that you've always wanted to learn, not necessarily school related, but just something that you have personally wanted to learn, or things that to help with your learning and keep you learning. So I've broken these into 4 categories. The first one I want to talk about is the challenge category. So the first thing you can do is you can start a new hobby. So if you've always wanted to paint, you can start taking up painting, get some basic supplies. If you've always wanted to learn how to code on the computer, you can, do that. There's plenty of opportunities there. So, for example, my daughter and I have always wanted to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons. So we have the starter set, and during this 2 to 3 weeks, our goal is going to be to learn how to play Dungeons and Dragons. And so we've set that goal and it's going to be a hobby, and it's what we're going to be working on partially during this 2 to 3 weeks. Second thing that you can do is you can learn a new board game, or a new video game for that matter. But I like board games especially because board games trigger parts of your brain maybe that you wouldn't normally be using if you're being passive, and so you have to be active. And video games can do that too. So an example here would be we are going to we have this game called Ticket to Ride, which we've never played before. And so as a family, we have challenged ourselves to learn how to play Ticket to Ride, so that we will be able to do that during this time. And then we can play the game all throughout the time that we are spending together. The third thing you could do is to do a passion project. A passion project is something you've always wanted to learn how to do, but never either took the time to do it or never took the initiative to do it, of something of that nature. So what I've decided to do for my passion project is I have always wanted to learn how to solve a Rubik's Cube. And so this is a Rubik's Cube, and it's very difficult, and there are YouTube videos I'm going to look at. I'm going to read some instructions. I'm even going to scaffold it. I have this tiny Rubik's Cube that is a 4-sided one that I'm going to start with, and I'm going to get comfortable with it by doing this and trying to get all the sides matched. And then once I become comfortable with how you do that and the strategy involved, I'm going to move up to my more difficult or challenging passion project, which is learning how to do the actual, 9-sided, 9-squared Rubik's Cube. And so the passion projects can be anything. So maybe you've always wanted to learn how to skateboard, or maybe you've always wanted to learn how to sew. These are things that you can do during this time. You don't have to have someone telling you what to do. You can say, this is something I've always wanted to learn about. If you watch the movie Thor Ragnarok and you are fascinated with Norse mythology, you could research Norse mythology and find out all about the lineage of the gods with Norse mythology. So all sorts of things you could do there. A fourth challenge thing you could do is take this teachable moment to start a dystopian story. So you've already got the beginning to the story. A virus, pandemic, spreads across the entire world, getting people sick at a moment's notice. That is the tagline to the beginning of your dystopian story. And then you take it from there, and you can make it a short story. You could turn it into a novel. You could make it an anime, or you can make it a graphic novel. You could shoot a video of it. There's all sorts of things you could do. But again, it's taking this teachable moment and using it to kind of spark another interest, which is creating stories, and of that. So a fifth thing you might do is to film your own YouTube video if you aren't already doing that. So there are tons of different YouTube videos that are available, and people have different things that they do, different things that they show, different talents they display. So is there something that you would like to share in a YouTube video? Of course, get your parents' permission, but shoot a YouTube video while you have this time to yourself to entertain yourself and entertain others, and to just get people, getting you used to the fact of how to make one of these videos. And who knows, and people might watch it, people may not, but you're putting it out there and you're learning how to do something. So that would be another challenge thing. So the next category is the idea of academic. So we are trying to get school in this 3 weeks. We're not under any false pretenses that kids will not be sitting down at 8:30 and learning until 3:30 in the afternoon what we ask them to do, because we're not giving them that much work. But there are things that you can be doing to challenge yourself academically, even besides what your teachers give you or what your school provides you. So one thing you could do is you could read a book. So I'm going to take this opportunity to work on my professional development. And I'm going to read a book called The Gift of Failure. And so I'm going to set my goal for this 3 weeks to read this book a little bit every day until I finish the book. And this is a book I've always wanted to read. So I'm not suggesting that you read a book that you're told to read, or read a book that your teacher said that you need to read. I'm suggesting that you find a book that you've maybe never picked up but always wanted to, or were curious about, and you decide to read that book just for the sake of reading. Imagine that. Another academic thing. So in the teachable moment, so there are people that are going to contract the coronavirus, and they are going to have to be quarantined for 14 days. And so I want you to imagine what that might be like. And look at that. This is a kind of a math problem, which is how much supplies would you need if you were quarantined for 14 days in a room by yourself or in a house by yourself? What supplies would you need? How much of it would you need? How much would that cost? What are some luxury items you might want to have in there as well? So there are people. Tom Hanks is one example. He's been quarantined, and so he's kind of in this. He's in this room, and he doesn't look like there's much to do, but he has to figure out, they have to figure out how they're going to feed them, all those things. So look at the math behind this, and what would go involved in creating your quarantine room, and what you would need in order to be able to be in there for 14 days without any contact, maybe with other people. So another academic thing you could do is if you're a social studies fan or a science fan, you can analyze how the coronavirus has spread through different countries. So different countries, it has spread at different rates. So in Italy, it has pretty much shut down the whole country. There are other countries like Greece, which don't have a single case. And so analyze what those governments did and what those their centers of disease control have done in order to stymie the spread of the coronavirus, or that they didn't do that they should have, and that's the reason why it's spreading. So it would just give you a chance to analyze, a real life teachable moment. What is going on? And the news coming out there's no definitive news right now. So there's a lot of, you have to sift through that and figure out what is accurate, what is not, and what is true, and what is sort of true, and what is rumor. And so that would be a great opportunity to use your analytical skills, and learn a little bit about different countries, and learn about the way their governments work, and all of that. So that would be another academic one. The next category is recreational. So you should not be sitting down in front of a computer at 8:30 and getting up at 3:30, and you've been working that entire time. This is an opportunity for you to do some learning, but at the same time, maybe do some other recreational things that you wouldn't do if you were at school. And so let me give you some examples. So one of these examples, you might want to cook or bake something. So find a meal that you have always wanted to make, or that you think would be good, and with your parents' permission, of course, cook that meal. Or if you'd like to bake a dessert that you've never tried before. Now, here's the nice thing about cooking and baking that I like, is that A lot of times it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. There's some failure involved in cooking and baking where it doesn't turn out good or whatever, but you learn from those mistakes. You learn from the failure and then you make it better the next time. So you may say, oh, I didn't put enough sugar in there, or I didn't put enough, lemon in that particular dish or whatever. So you learn from that and you make it better the next time. So you're learning how to overcome things, how to persevere. You're learning how to have grit with doing something like cooking and baking. So challenge yourself to do something like that. Another recreational thing that you might consider do is going for walks. Getting out of, again, with your parents' permission and making sure that you're with an adult, just going for a walk around the neighborhood. It is starting to be spring here in Ohio where we're shut down. And so you don't want to be cooped up in your house all day. You want to get out and without being around a lot of people, you want to get out, be able to enjoy the day. And so, go for a walk around your block if you're able to, or, ask an adult to take you to the park and you guys can walk together. But just take the opportunity to enjoy the day and to not always having to be doing something academic during those hours. Another recreational thing you might want to do is you could do something artistic, like you could paint a picture, you could draw something, you could do a craft. I'm not much of a painter or a drawer, but I can certainly do a craft. So this is just something that's hands-on, that's manipulative, that is able to use your creativity, and it should be something that's fun. Again, it's not work, it's not homework, it's not anything the school assigned. It's just you enjoying, being artistic in whatever way you need to do that. So some may use, play Minecraft and create different structures with their Minecraft. There's a lot of artistic, thinking going on with something like that. Or you could play with Legos. There's all sorts of things you could do that are artistic, where you're creating and you're getting to be creative at the same time. So another recreational thing would be to finish a project. So is there a project that you have started and you've never completed it? So for me, there are things around the house that I have started and always meant to finish but never did. And so I'm going to do my best to go around and complete those projects. For you, it might be a project and something that you sat down and you started to write a book and you kind of stopped. Pick that back up and do that. It could be, it's something that, doing with your room, you started putting up shelves, you started organizing something and you stopped. And so finish that project. Take this opportunity when you have this time to do something, that is going to allow you to finish a project. Another thing to do is clean an area of the house you normally wouldn't. I know what you're thinking. I don't want to clean my house and I don't want to clean my room, but it's interesting how cathartic cleaning can be, especially with something like this coronavirus going around, where there's a lot of disinfectant, a lot of Lysol, a lot of wipes, and so there's a lot of cleaning going on at our schools and our businesses and our government buildings. And I'm not saying to sterilize your house. What I'm saying is, if you have a coat room that is kind of messy and not organized, take the opportunity to do that. It will teach you some executive function. And how to organize things, or how to, break a task down into parts, manageable parts, and then complete each one of those parts. It could be, I'm going to clean our garage out because our garage is a mess. And so I'm going to take the opportunity to clean the garage because I just don't have time on the weekend sometimes, it feels like. And so I'm going to have some time here. So I'm going to take the opportunity to do that. The last category of things that you could do is doing things that are going to require you to think. Keep in mind, just because you're not in school doesn't mean that you shouldn't be thinking. And even when you're not in school, you should be doing thinking all the time. So what are things that you are going to do to exercise your brain, to activate it, to keep it running, to keep yourself thinking about things? And so there are various activities you could do. One of those would be to journal. And so you could just journal your thoughts and what you're thinking. And you would use prompts. Like one prompt you could do is, what would schools be like if they started over again? So in other words, they're shutting down the schools. What if they came back and they decided to tear it all down and just start from scratch? What would you design the school to look like? What would it look like it does now? Would it have teachers the way that teachers are used now? There's all sorts of possibilities that you could think of coming up with that scenario and what's the best way that you learn or maybe others learn. Another prompt may be is what happens in Disney World, because Disneyland and all its attractions have been shut down. So what happens in Disney World when there's no one there? Do the rides get up and do things? Do they, do the people that play the different costumes, do they ride all the rides because no one's there? So what are some things that they may do? You can be really imaginative. You could be realistic. You could be a lot of things there. But you could just journal your thoughts on that. So journaling, and you can if you Google like journal prompts, there's tons of things that will come up online, and so you can use those to kind of activate your brain into thinking. Another thing that you might do is you might exercise your brain. Exercise your brain by doing puzzles specifically. So you could do Sudoku, which is using numbers in order to figure out where they are placed. You could use logic puzzles or cryptograms. There's all sorts of puzzles that you can do that are going to trigger your thought, your thinking, are going to activate your mind. And what I've included here is a link to some puzzle packs that I have for free. And you can download these and use these during your time, or you can just Google these different types of puzzles, and a ton of them will show up, and you can just print them up, or you can find ones that are online. I have an app, the Sudoku app, on my iPad, and I use that to do my Sudoku puzzles. So another thing to think about is again, teachable moment. One thing that has happened as a result of this coronavirus is that there has been a run on toilet paper at the grocery stores. I was there yesterday, and they were clean out. There was not a single roll of toilet paper on the shelf. And so it leads to an interesting question, which is what happens if you run out of toilet paper? What if that toilet paper is never replaced? What if we never have toilet paper? What would an alternative be? It would kind of be, you might think it's a little disgusting, but it would actually be a thought-provoking activity where you're like, oh, well, what would you use to if you didn't have toilet paper? What would an alternative be? What would, could there be something that could be made that's better than toilet paper? And so there's all sorts of thinking possibilities you can think of with a scenario like that. Another thinking activity you could do is during this coronavirus time, they've shut down all major sports. So the NBA is suspended for the next few weeks. Tennis is not going to go for 6 weeks. They're postponing the beginning of the baseball season. The NHL has suspended games. So could you imagine what would happen had those games been played? So what if that 2 weeks hadn't been, or 3 weeks or 6 weeks, whatever, hadn't been lost? How would have things been? So you could look up, statistics. You could look up matchups. You can try to predict what it would have been like, and and who would have made the playoffs, or who would have started out really well, or whatever. But you can, if you're a sports fan, this is one really is going to get you thinking about what could have been, the what if scenario. What if the season had played out like it was supposed to? What would have happened? Would things have been very different? What happens when they come back? How's that going to look? I mean, baseball is stopped spring training, and they're delaying the start of the actual baseball season. Are they going to, delay it for a month? And then what happens to the playoffs? So there's all sorts of possibilities and what if situations that you can kind of explore there. So you could plan a dream trip, would be another thinking activity. So what is someplace you've always wanted to go? And so if you give yourself an unlimited budget, or even a limited budget, how would you get there? What would you do when you were there? What are the attractions you do? Where would you stay? So I've always wanted to go to Scotland. So I would look up, you have the internet at your fingertips. I would look up what it would take to get me to Scotland, whether it's for flights, where I would stay, what are places I've always wanted to go see Loch Ness. And so what would that entail, and what would that look like? How many days would I need? So it's just a thinking activity, but it's kind of fun to do, because then you can kind of fantasize about what your trip would be like in taking that trip. So the final activity I'm going to suggest is simply to challenge yourself. So find ways to challenge yourself. So if you find yourself being bored, rather than going to maybe some usual things like watching YouTube or playing video games or watching television, challenge yourself to try something different, to try something maybe you normally wouldn't do, to challenge yourself to, maybe take on something that you wouldn't have done normally, but because you have this opportunity, you can do that. So there's lots of things in here that I've suggested. Think about challenging yourself by taking on one of these things, or taking on some other things. So there you have it. There are 19 things that you could be doing during the 2 to 3 weeks or longer that you are going to be off of school, but you still want to be learning, you still want to be thinking. I'm not suggesting that you do all 19 of these. What I am suggesting is that you pick a few that you think would be really interesting to do. Not necessarily the easiest ones, but the ones that would be the most, maybe more challenging to you, or would get you to think more. Because this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to learn from this moment, and because you are going to be in a place where you're going to have to be somewhat independent. You're going to have to take initiative. You're not going to have the teacher there, constantly reminding you what you need to do, and your parents, may not be able to be around and do that as well. They may have things that they need to do, so you're going to have to take some initiative. And so this will give you an opportunity to be a learner and to see what type of learner that you are.